Jamie Stegmeyer with Stillmeyer Games, and I am happy to be here today to chat with you, to answer your questions, to share some Stillmeyer Games news, and to discuss random topics all over the place here live on Facebook and later on YouTube if you're watching this in the future on YouTube. It is April 21st today. We had a snowy day in St. Louis yesterday, an uncharacteristically cold day in St. Louis, and now it is bright and sunny. Still cold, but not snowing. Very odd to get snow in the middle of April here in St. Louis. So I'm wondering if you have gotten any odd or weird weather this spring. Before I forget, today's chocolate of the day. So yesterday we saw that a local, well, it's a chain, but it's local to us. A local cookie place called Insomnia had a special yesterday called Cookie Nachos. And we could not resist getting the cookie nachos. And so we have some left, so I thought I'd show them on camera. They don't look quite as appealing as they did yesterday. But it was basically just a pile of these miniature chocolate chip cookies with cookie butter on the top and sprinkles and Reese's Pieces. And yeah, they were delicious. We have a little bit left to eat after lunch today. I'm going to pause for a second here because I don't see, usually I see some comments from now from people saying hi. So maybe there just aren't any comments, that's fine. But if someone could try to comment just to say hello, just so I know that people can comment today, because I am not. Oh, interesting. So YouTube is telling, or Facebook is telling me that there are comments, but I can't see them, which is a bit of a problem. Oh, here we go. They moved the comment section. Oh, well, that's a little. Let's see if I can open it in a new tab. Huh. All right. Well, we'll have to make that work. Usually the comments were on the left, and I could see myself talking while the comments were there. I guess I don't need to look at myself, though. I can just look over the comments, which are down below now. Facebook changed it up a bit. Okay, well, we can work with this. Now I know there are comments here. Cool. Eddie says, Cookie Nachos, what heaven did you make it to? The heaven that is St. Louis. All right, we'll make this work. Just a little slightly different format here, a little different, but we'll make it work. A little harder to scroll as well. It scrolls like the whole screen instead of just. All right, Facebook changing things up. Yeah, chat says, don't you love it when they change things? Yeah. Some people are saying some nice things about Red Rising, the collector's edition, which is being received in the U.S. and Canada and around the world, shipped from the U.S. today. If you're not in Australia, New Zealand, or Europe. In which case your copies have already shipped from those regional fulfillment centers. In Canada, there was a little bit of confusion because the fulfillment center D6 printed what appears to be all of the shipping labels last week, even though they didn't actually ship all the games last week. And so that has created some confusion, understandably so. We encourage our fulfillment centers to create shipping labels not more than a day or two before they actually ship the games. So I'm sorry about the confusion if you're in Canada, but your games are in the shipping process. And if they aren't shipped this week, especially if you're a champion, that's a big problem and a problem with D6, and we will talk to them about that. So please keep us in the loop, but not necessarily today. Wait until maybe Friday. And if you're in Canada and you're a champion and you have not gotten your Red Rising shipping notification, please let us know on Friday afternoon. That would be really helpful. Oh man, this is going to be annoying. I'm talking about how Facebook moved the comments around. Just it makes it a little worse. Let me try. So there's an option for me to make it pop out. So I'll try that option to see if that's so I can look at the comments on their own page. That's a little better. Okay, we'll make that work, and I can flip back if I need to actually see myself talk. Okay, let's see. I'll move my little sticky note over. Sean has a little bit of a spoiler comment, so I won't read the whole comment, Sean, but he asked about a character called actually you asked it in a way that isn't a spoiler. You asked about a character called Reaper, the Reaper, who is in the game but under a different name. And this is a character who undergoes a transformation, but at the beginning of the first book, this character is a red. And so given our desire to introduce new people to the world of Red Rising without spoiling anything, we definitely made that character. For that reason, we made that character a red in the game. Dana's joining us from Australia. I think it's pretty late in Australia right now, Dana. So thanks for joining us all the way from over there, from down there. Chris says, how are Biddy and Walter? And right on cue, Walter walked into the room. Now, this is one of the instances where I can't actually see the camera because I'm looking at the comments, but hopefully you can see Walter on camera right now. Chris just asked about you, bud. You want to say hi? Walter is doing well. He's probably hungry right now. That's why he's coming in here. Okay. Chris says, will we ever see Biddy and Walter in a promo card for Pendulum, Red Rising, and or Wingspan? We don't do many promo cards these days, but will we see them in those games? I mean, I'd love to get them in all those games at some point. So Wingspan will be tough because it's a game about birds and not a game about animals that prey on birds or can prey on birds. Red Rising, I think, is maybe more likely if we do an expansion to sneak it into the art somewhere, although I still want to respect the IP. My cats don't exist in the Red Rising world, but maybe I could sneak them in a little bit. Yeah, we'll see about that. Gazdag says, do I have any news about the Hungarian release for Red Rising? I don't, and even if I did, that wouldn't be my news to share. That would be news for our Hungarian partner to share for Red Rising. So I'm actually not sure offhand which Hungarian partner of ours is working on Red Rising. So if you know, feel free to reach out to them and ask for any news or updates that they are willing to provide at this time. Wesley says, the cookies look delicious, the chocolate of the day. And he has a little story about Charterstone. Let me make sure it's not a spoiler. Okay, it is not. He says they're working through Game 5 of the Recharge Pack for Charterstone. We got a label maker and have enjoyed creating some interesting new job names and fun names. Also we created one colony called the Fair, one charter I think is referred to, called the Fair, and another one called Raleigh. The one guy in our group who always cracks that the Fair is in Raleigh whenever someone says that's fair is wildly upset that the Fair is no longer in Raleigh. That's great. I don't know if I completely get that reference, but I'm glad you guys are having fun with the naming elements of Charterstone, of which there are many in Charterstone. It's a legacy game for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and you write a lot on you name characters, you name areas of the board, you name your village itself, things like that. Kadrick says, when is the retail release date for Red Rising? It is May 28th. That is the retail release date for the standard version of the game, the $40 version of the game, the worldwide English retail release date. The other languages will be available whenever those partners have those copies ready, probably in a few months after that. Sam says, I recently read an interview with you and Alan Stone, my co-founder, that was done when Euphoria was in development, way back in the day, probably 2013. Alan mentioned that the next game was likely to be set in the Prohibition era. What happened to that game? Yeah, so this is when Alan was dabbling in game design himself. Early on in Stonemaier Games, we worked together a little bit more on game design. It ends up being pretty similar now, but basically, Alan was the only other person I was working with, and so I would work on the design, and then he would be essentially the lead local playtester with me. And so Alan dabbled a little bit himself in game design, things that he was experimenting with, and he was curious about a game set in the Prohibition era. And then I think Alan realized that game design is a lot of work, and he didn't want to spend his time on that. He wanted to spend his time doing other things and creating other things. Alan's very handy. He has built parts of his home for his family, things like that. But creating games in that way, as the lead designer, wasn't something that he was passionate enough about to pursue. Yeah. Chad says, was there a reason why the artist covered up Darrow's face in a mask in the art on the Darrow card in Red Rising? Was it to keep the reader's imagination of that character intact? I think there was a reason. I don't know if I can recall it exactly offhand. I think Darrow does wear a mask throughout the books at times. And it might have been partially related to that spoiler thing that I don't want to directly say that Sean asked about earlier. I think that might have been part of the reason. Sometimes one of the artists, Miles, joins in here, although I don't think Miles did the art for Darrow. I think that was Justin Wong. So I'm going to have to ask Justin what he was thinking about that, if he had a specific reason that he put Darrow in a mask. Morgan says, I noticed there were 2 copies of the Gold Elite Fitchner in my collector's edition of Red Rising. I think that's an anomaly, Morgan. Yeah, I haven't heard that happening. Sometimes, when these cards are printed on these big sheets and they're cut out of these sheets and then sorted. And so it's possible every now and then a card gets mixed in with another card, but there's not 2 Fitchners on those card sheets. And so it is an anomaly for that to happen to you. And I'd recommend only playing with one of them. You should only have one copy of Fitchner in your game. Genway says, will there be games based on the rest of the Red Rising books in the future? We have no plans necessarily for the future of Red Rising. We want there to be a future, but we haven't even released the retail game yet. So we are curious to see what happens with that, and we'll take it day by day. But our hope is after Pierce finishes book six, the third book in the second trilogy, that we will either expand the world of Red Rising through an expansion, or maybe do a spin-off game set in that world. That's our hope. We have no definite plans at this point. Ryan says that he had a great time playing Red Rising last night for the first time. Happy to hear that. Chris says, have I watched any good movies lately? I did watch a great movie this past weekend, one that I've seen before, and that is Booksmart. I really, really love the movie Booksmart. We wanted something familiar, so we returned to that, having already seen that. What else did we watch this weekend? We definitely watched something else. I'll pull up my movies list here. We watched Date Night and Game Night. We originally watched Date Night thinking that it was the movie Game Night, but it wasn't. Date Night is still a perfectly fine movie. Both are kind of dark comedies. But Game Night is the one that I find really, really funny. So after we watched Date Night and realized that we weren't watching the movie that we thought we were watching, we then, I think, Friday night, Saturday night, we watched Game Night. That was Friday night, yeah. No new movies that I've really, really loved lately. We are watching some good shows. We're watching Invincible right now on Amazon, which is very interesting. I really enjoy it. It is more violent than, well, actually no, I don't necessarily mind the violence. I think the violence has a purpose, but it's gory. It's very gory. It's an animated show, so it isn't necessarily as disturbing as it might be to have a live action show. But it's I don't know. I'm going to write about it on my personal blog tonight because I want to process it a little bit because I'm loving some of the themes, the archetypes in Invincible, and some of the twists. But I'm not sure the gore plays a role, has a purpose. And I think movies that use a lot of gore, or shows that use a lot of gore, I think the gore needs to have a purpose. So I'm curious what you all think. If you've watched Invincible, what do you think about the graphic nature of it, specifically in terms of the blood and gore? Do you think that serves a purpose in the show? And maybe it does. I mean, maybe sometimes a lot of that stuff is kind of brushed over in superhero movies where we don't see a lot of superhero movies, supervillains are fighting. They're really hurting each other, and we don't usually see the impact of that as much. And so maybe it's important for us to see that in a show. Yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on that if you've seen the show. Let's see. Giovanni says, am I planning on backing After the Empire? I definitely do like to support other St. Louis businesses. I looked at the prices yesterday, and that is definitely more than a price that I want to pay for After the Empire. It's I don't generally go for the deluxe versions of games because I don't need the $100 version of the game, but that's generally that there are exceptions to that, and I have obviously games in our collection that are up there close to the $100 price point, Tapestry and Scythe among them, and I would be happy to buy those games. But yeah, I don't know. I want to buy and play the retail version of the game, but I don't really feel the need to get the deluxe version of the game. Yeah. Lionel says, "Do you think I can play Red Rising with my 10-year-old son?" I think so. Yeah. I mean, there are some mature themes in Red Rising, but we have the plot points in those themes aren't really in the cards all that much. The character cards kind of hint at those things, but they don't delve into them. So I would say I don't think the Red Rising books are quite age appropriate for a 10-year-old unless you're kind of reading along and talking through those more difficult themes. But the game itself is definitely friendly in terms of gameplay and theme for a 10-year-old. Yeah. I feel like I have cat eyes on me right now. I can't see. Let's see if I can. Oh, there's Walter. Okay, he's getting occupied. If you're joining us right now, Facebook has changed their interface, so I can either look at the camera or I can look at the comments, but I can't look at both, which is really weird. This is the first time that I'm just looking at the comments and not looking at the camera. So I'm focusing maybe a little bit more on the comments right now. Let me answer a few more questions, then I'll jump over to some of the random topics that I have today. Yeah, I've talked about Red Rising shipping. That was the main thing about Stonemaier Games. Oh, I also did a blog post the other day called "If Tomorrow You Became the President of Stonemaier Games, What Would You Do?" Just an open-ended question that I asked to Stonemaier ambassadors, and I think from the results, I think it's definitely a great question for any company to ask their most passionate fans, their most passionate volunteers, to see what they would do if they took the helm. and got some really interesting answers. Some that were really out there, things that were interesting to read, but I probably wouldn't consider, and some that we've already started to do or definitely plan to do in the future. I'll read some of those ideas out loud so you can see some of um, the top, the ones that came up in the category of we're fairly likely to do this. Let me pull up the blog real quick. Okay, so some of those, there were three of them. So use more of a consistent format for our rule books and iconography. And that I think is just great advice. I've seen companies like Garp Hill Games and Red Raven Games do this, especially in terms of iconography, that I think really helps consistency from game to game. Um, we do deal with different worlds in all of our games, and so icons I think need to be changed a little bit for each of those worlds, but some form of consistency I think is helpful. And for the rule books, yeah, rule book consistency, like if you know that you always look here in the rule book for this certain thing. Although even then, as I talk about this, when I create a rule book, I use the same template every time. It just the rules for different games, certain parts of different rules in different games need different spaces in the rule books. But yeah, I actually do use the same template whenever I create a rule book. There was make new games and worlds we've already visited in Stonemaier products. So people like the idea of interconnected worlds, or not interconnected worlds, but spin-offs from worlds that we've already started to dive into. And then partner with schools and libraries to get more of our games in classrooms around the world. And I mentioned here in the post that I actually have a chat this afternoon with a librarian who's also a gamer who posted recently about having game publishers donate games to libraries, which I think is certainly a worthy cause. I emailed her about it though, and wanted to talk more about it because I know, having myself volunteered in libraries when I was younger, that libraries have a budget. They don't get those books for free. Libraries don't get books for free. They have a budget and they buy those books. And so I want to talk to this librarian about the possibility of getting our games into the same distributors that sell books to libraries, so that we can sell our games to libraries at a very nice discount. But it is a business in both respects. Libraries have a budget. We are a seller of games. So I want to talk to this librarian about that concept. And then there was probably the most controversial, unfortunately, comment, which was one of the ambassador suggestions that came up several times, was to focus even more on finding, including, and engaging designers, artists, reviewers, independent contractors, and customers who aren't already involved and supported by the gaming community and industry, specifically in regards to engaging people of different ethnicities and ages and genders who maybe don't already feel welcome or as welcome as they should in the gaming community and gaming industry, which I thought was a wonderful thing to include. We're always looking to include more people and to reach out to people who don't feel welcome, don't feel included, regardless of their race, gender, creed, culture, nations, sexualities, or ages, all that stuff. So I think that's a really important point as well. Anyway, those are some of the highlights from things that ambassadors told us that they would do if they became the president of Stonemaier Games tomorrow. I'll jump back to comments right here. Damien says, have I heard of the game It's a Wonderful Kingdom? I have. Yeah, I looked into that on Kickstarter yesterday. Would it inspire you to revisit games you designed specifically for two players? Yeah, that's an interesting question. So when I think, I have two schools of thought, and this actually did come up in that article that I just mentioned. I'll try to answer briefly. First is, when I think about my favorite dual versions, like two-player versions of games, of existing games, I do think about games that have changed a lot of the aspects of that game specifically for a dual format. The classic, I think, in my mind, being Seven Wonders Duel. It is a similar game. It uses similar icons, some similar cards, maybe even some of the same art from Seven Wonders, but it is very much a different game than Seven Wonders, which I think is awesome. At the same time, I know that's a lot of work. You're essentially designing a new game from scratch for two players. And as some of our games, our focus is on games that play from 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 players. So while I love that about Seven Wonders Duel, I am also, if I were ever to branch out into a standalone game for 1 to 2 players, say, it would be more of my inclination to use a format that we already exist, that we already know exists and already know that it works, and publish simply maybe a two-player standalone expansion, that type of thing, that could be added to the core game but could also stand alone. That would be my inclination, I think, with the idea there being that if you are a gamer that primarily plays 1 or 2 with one other player or by yourself, solo games, that you wouldn't have to buy all those extra components that go into many games to expand up to 5 or 6 players. So I'm kind of playing around with those two conflicting ideas right now. Sam says, how many submissions have you had through our submission form? We average around 200 a year. I don't know how many are on the form right now. I think the last time I checked, there were around 800 or 900 submissions to people who have submitted, designers who have submitted their games to us for publication. Scott is here from GTS. Scott, I love that you've been dropping in the last few weeks. Thanks for doing that. He says that he's really been enjoying the solo mode of Red Rising. He says, what's my favorite upgrade that I've done on any Stonemaier product over the years, either in the games like Red Rising or additional items like the Legendary Box for Scythe? And the gold foil on Red Rising cards is definitely up there. I love the look of that gold foil. Let me think of some of our other games. Actually, one of the favorites, I've mentioned this a couple times, but one of my favorites is just the material that we now use on our rule books. Just that we moved away from that standard material that I never even thought about for a while, and use a more special texture for that, for those rule books. So yeah, it's just a little upgrade, and we use it in all of our games now. But I really like, as much as we go through rule books and touch them and feel them and read them, it's nice that they can actually feel good too in our hands. So that's one of my. It's just a little upgrade, but that might be my favorite. Yeah, we're definitely up there. Chad recommends a book called The Humans, if I like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks for that recommendation, Chad. Yeah, I'll check that out. I do like Hitchhiker's Guide. Tim says that he's watching Mortal Kombat, the new Mortal Kombat movie this weekend, and he says that he watched Nobody and the Honesty Thief this past weekend. I haven't heard of either of those. I'm curious about Mortal Kombat. Again, I mentioned gore in terms of Invincible, so I'm curious what that means for the Mortal Kombat movie. Yeah, we'll see about that. Matthew says that he's anxious to get Red Rising in Canada. He says, I just finished my university exams and I'm craving some board games now. What should I play? Scythe, Tapestry, or Wingspan? I get to pick. He doesn't have Pendulum or Viticulture yet, or they would be on the list. So Scythe, Tapestry, or Wingspan? I don't. It's hard to say, Matthew. I don't know your taste in games. If I could pick, let's say, if I could pick any of those games to play with you right now, Matthew, I was kind of in the mood for Wingspan the other day, and Red Rising. I'm always in the mood for Tapestry or Scythe too, though. I'd go for Wingspan. Yeah, let's go for Wingspan. We'll play some Wingspan. Alex recommends the movie Murder by Win. Murder by Win. Some comments in there. Murder, comma, Barry, not Barry, not by, Barry. Murder, Barry, Win. It's an indie movie that is solidly done. Alex is joining us from Board Game Co., which is an excellent YouTube channel that I follow pretty much every day. Jake, one of my disc golf buddies and also a gamer, says he thinks the gore in Invincible is almost worse than in live action because of the ability to hold the camera on things that you couldn't do in another medium. He says, I think it has a purpose in the show, which is that it makes the show feel like it really has stakes, which is difficult to pull off in a superhero animated show. That's a good point. That's a really good point, Jake. Because you're right, it is animated. And so, I feel like in animated shows and movies, we see people like fall off buildings, but our minds don't connect that to pain as well because they're animated characters. And so Invincible almost goes out of its way to show that, yeah, even though it's animated, these characters are feeling pain, the stakes are high, there is danger in this world. And yeah, that's an excellent point. I can definitely see that, especially for the animated format, Jake. Andrew says, can I tell... Oh, no, Andrew has a comment that... well, I'll read it out loud. Andrew says, can you tell us any more about the Libertalia rumors? I will tell you the facts, which is that someone found that Stonemaier Games has registered the trademark for the name Libertalia. Let's see. Kermit says, I've tried Scythe, Wingspan, Tapestry, and Charterstone. All of them are fun. I just got in Red Rising, but I haven't tried it yet. What I want to know is what is the next Stonemaier game I should buy? Let's see. Well, I played Red Rising first. Since you have Red Rising, Kermit, go ahead and play that. You should get plenty of replayability out of Red Rising. So if you liked and played all those games, I'd say Viticulture, actually. Viticulture has a lot of the theme, the flow, the engine building, the the progress of those games that you just mentioned. So yeah, I'd recommend Viticulture to be next after Red Rising. Sean asked if I played the Drew Hayes books, Superpowers. I have not read them yet. No, no, I have not. I know. I think you or maybe someone else has recommended them. I looked into them, but haven't explored them yet. I can't remember why. If it was because they were adult fiction, maybe they were graphic novels. I usually read on my Kindle, and so I don't typically read too many graphic novels unless I get them in paperback or hardback. Rafa says, how does making game implementations in Board Game Arena affect sales of the physical games? That's a good question. I don't know yet. We don't have any of our games on Board Game Arena yet, except for Viticulture, which is an alpha. Tapestry's been in the works for a while, but hasn't released yet on Board Game Arena. So I don't know. I'm curious to find out myself. My theory is, like with most digital games, that the digital games support the sales of the tabletop games. They expose more people to them, and so some people will fall in love with the online version and want the real version on their table. It also helps people learn the rules to the game. So, which can make them more likely to get their copy of the game to the table or to get a copy of the game and get it to the table. So that's my theory, but we'll see how that actually plays out. Let's see. Kirk says, you are a game designer, developer, and publisher. Which do you think you are best at? Which are you most proud of? If introducing yourself to a non-gamer, which title would you present yourself with? I can answer the last one easiest. I am Jamie Stegmeyer, and I run Stonemaier Games. Although even the word run is getting less and less accurate because Joe and Alex are so fantastic to work with on a daily basis, my coworkers. So they also run Stonemaier Games. What am I most proud of? Game designer, developer, and publisher. I'd say publisher. I mean, I am happy that I've been able to bring some of my games to life and bring joy to tabletops worldwide through my games. But I'm even happier that I have done that for other designers as well. So I'm definitely the most proud of that. Which do I think I'm the best at? I don't know if I'm the best at anything. I don't know. Between those three, which am I the best at? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. It's really hard for me to answer that. I don't think of myself as being the best at anything, really. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, but I don't really have an answer for it. Yeah. Um, and I know, yeah. Yeah, I don't have an answer for it, but thank you for asking that, Kirk. Barry says that he was surprised to see the Lost Ruins of Arnak on Board Game Arena already. He says he played a game last night and it worked great. Any chance Stonemaier Games coming to Board Game Arena? Yeah, I just mentioned this, Barry. Tapestry is in the works and Viticulture is already in alpha. And I'd be happy to put more of our games on there as well. It's just a matter of Board Game Arena finding a developer to pair with those games and actually get it done. Yeah. Jan Williams says, as you were talking about rulebooks earlier, I've been wondering why you tend to publish your rulebooks as the same size as the box, like in the Pendulum rulebook. I personally find that with games filling up the table, there's little space for the rulebook. A magazine-sized rulebook would be more easy to handle. Have you ever had feedback as to which size rulebook people like most? That is a great question, and that's actually been on my mind a lot recently, because I recently watched a video from the Cardboard Herald, where he was talking about rulebook sizes, and he recommended a rulebook size. It's 165 by 240 millimeters. It's smaller than a magazine because he says it's really easy to just open it up with two hands, to hold it open with one hand, and to put it on the table while you're playing. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was a really, really great point to make. And we do have some rulebooks. Some of our rulebooks are, in fact, I would say most of our rulebooks are the size of kind of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Viticulture is definitely that way. Wingspan is that way. Tapestry isn't. Pendulum isn't. Red Rising isn't. So I think it depends at times based on how many pages we want the rulebook to be. So with Tapestry, I think it's nice that you can just have a very short rulebook. You can see all the information about all the different actions all on one page, that type of thing. Red Rising, we also wanted a shorter rulebook. But a shorter rulebook that's bigger isn't always better, isn't always easier to consume. So I think you make a great point, and this is definitely something that I actually just recently talked to my graphic designer about, and about exploring that smaller rulebook size, even smaller than the magazine size that you mentioned, looking at the 165 by 240 millimeter size. Let's see. Some games that I played recently. Just to throw this out there, have been playing, or we've been playing through the Hero Realms cooperative campaign. We just finished the Lost Village scenario. Played another game of Dune Imperium. Continue to really love that game. I played a few drafts of the new Magic set Strixhaven this past weekend on Magic Online. Really had a lot of fun with that, and I'm looking forward to drafting that in person as well. I played Vamp on the Batwalk, which is a trick-taking game where you can't see your own hand of cards. Kind of like Pikoko, but a little different because you're actually playing cards from your own hand. And I played Odin's Ravens just last night. In fact, I had this on my desk. I'm going to do a little video about that today, about Odin's Ravens. Um, and I also played a nice game of disc golf the other day and posted a blog post on my personal blog about watching disc golf tournaments on YouTube, which I found to be a lot of fun. Like way more fun than I may even have watching other sports on live TV because of the format that a lot of the YouTube creators use to post these tournaments. I'm kind of broken down basket by basket on YouTube. So really enjoying that right now. Also, the video I did this past week, I have kind of a pair of videos. I did a video about cooperative games with a player-driven puzzle in them. Like, the focus of the game is a player-driven puzzle, like in the Mind. The players are trying to solve a puzzle in the game The Mind, opposed to games where you are struggling against the game itself or the game's AI. And that latter category is a category that most cooperative games are in that category. And while it isn't my favorite, I prefer the other category. I prefer the player-driven puzzle. I do have a video about my top 10 games in this other category coming out this coming Sunday. Yeah. All right, let me back over to questions real quick. Daniel says, Happy International Tea Day. Didn't know it was International Tea Day today. He says, apart from viticulture, are you more of a tea or a coffee kind of guy? Definitely more of a coffee kind of guy. I have some coffee in my mug right here. But I actually didn't drink coffee at all until about 2 years ago because it always made me really jittery. And now I usually kind of slowly drink a small cup every day over the course of about 7 hours. So I am very lightly a coffee guy. I don't need coffee every day, but I do enjoy a little cup every day if I can get it. I very rarely drink tea though. Jeff says, I seem to recall you saying in the past that Tapestry plans employs landmark cards or something that you might add to in future promos. This is something you might still explore. It's something that I would definitely like to explore the idea of landmark cards and Tapestry cards in the future. I think as long as we're making expansions for Tapestry, it's probably in those expansions that's where we'll explore adding more cards to the game. But there is the possibility of promos in the future for Tapestry if we stop making new expansions. George says, have I seen John Company on Kickstarter? I have. Yeah, I haven't backed it, but I have seen it. He says the publisher and designer, Cole, Warely, puts out some great games. Cole is, I think, best known for PAX Premier and Oath, and maybe he did Root. I'm not sure if he did Root, but I think he might have done it. But I haven't backed it. No. Cole's games are interesting to me, but they don't flow the way that I typically prefer games to flow. Like even in Root, which is a game that I really admire and respect and love the asymmetry in it, a player's turn can often take so long that it adds a lot of downtime to the other players who are kind of waiting for something to happen. So I prefer games where you're doing something quick and simple on your turn and moving on to the next player. That style of flow in games. But maybe Cole has some games like that I'm not aware of. Games without a lot of phases in them. Alex says, what's my favorite game to play solo? I don't really play tabletop games solo, even though we have solo modes in all of our games. Morton and Automa Factory are in charge of that aspect of our games. I would say the one example of this is when I play digital ports of games online against the AI. And I would say some of my favorites are Shards of Infinity and Lords of Waterdeep to do that if I'm ever in the mood for just to play a quick digital port. Jordan says, it feels like there aren't many non-Marvel or non-DC superhero board games? Do you think there is enough space for an indie superhero board game to work? I'd actually say there are quite a few, Jordan. I mean, there's Sentinels of the Multiverse. There's a few from I'm forgetting the name of the company right now, but there's another company that does it. I mean, I would say there are actually a fair number that branch out into other worlds, which I think is great. But I think there is room within that format for some new games. But I think yes, I think there's room for it, but not doing the same thing that I think a lot of the other superhero games have already done. Yeah. Jeff says, if I had to guess, what is the game that you've played more than any other game within the last 5 years? Oh man, I don't track my plays, so that's really hard to say. Uh, that's very hard to say. Huh, maybe Terra Mystica. I know I played Terra Mystica a ton, so maybe that. Maybe just one. I've played just one a lot. And these are games excluding Stonemaier Games products. Off the top of my head, that's my best guess, but I could be way off there. Okay, YouTube is doing weird things with the comments again, but I'll try to get to the questions here. Let's see. Landon says his brother recently bought him Rise of Fenris, but he hasn't played Scythe much. How many times should I play the base game before starting Rise of Fenris? A couple times. I mean, if you're excited to get into the campaign, I don't think you need to play Scythe all that often. But the way I typically think about expansions is expansions are great after you've played out the core game. So spend as much time as you want with Scythe, and then once you feel the need to add more stuff to play a campaign, then you can play the Rise of Fenris. But if you're itching to get to the Rise of Fenris, I think you could play Scythe once or twice and then jump into the campaign. Giovanni says, will both Wingspan expansions be back in stock at the same time? I believe they are among the same or in the same containers heading to our fulfillment centers. So I believe so, yes. Yeah, I hope so. Brist says, I'm thinking about getting Euphoria. Thoughts on the game? I am the designer of Euphoria, so I definitely am enthusiastic about the game. If you love dystopian fiction, I think you'll enjoy the game. If you enjoy dice worker placement style games, I think you'll enjoy it. I think the one caveat that I mentioned for Euphoria is that it is a little difficult to teach because there are a lot of interconnected systems. But there are some great videos out there to help you learn Euphoria. I think Watch It Played has a video. There are other people that have content creators that have great how to play videos for Euphoria. So you might explore some of them before you jump into it. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. There's a little bit of asymmetry in the game, some mechanisms that I'm really happy with how it turned out. Gary says, did I watch The Boys? And how does that equate to the earlier statement feelings towards violence and Invincible? Yeah, I did watch The Boys. I enjoyed it. And that's interesting. Interesting comparison because The Boys has some very graphic moments in it. And they were also tough to watch. Yeah, I think for me, I mean, gore and violence is always tough to watch. And I always have to question, like, was that necessary? And sometimes I think it was. Sometimes I think they are making a specific point with it. And sometimes I think filmmakers are just doing it for the sake of being gory and violent. And I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard line to cross there or to walk. Yeah. Amy says that she did a Twitch stream last night of my first Red Rising playthrough. Well, thank you for doing that, Amy. She says she really loved it, and thank you for making a great game, and thank you for sharing your Twitch name. I will have to look that up on Twitch. I don't often go to Twitch, but it's good when I'm in the mood to watch some streaming that I have some great people to follow along. So thanks for sharing that. Andrew says, do you use computer simulations to playtest your games? We do not use simulations, no. We do playtest some of our games on digital platforms like Tabletopia, Tabletop Simulator, but we don't have simulations running. Jeff says, have I watched Russian Doll? I have, yeah. I love time loop fiction, and I love Russian Doll among them. I have watched it. I think I've watched and read almost every piece of time loop fiction that I'm aware of. There's probably something that I'm not aware of, but every one that I've become aware of, I have watched or read it because I really, really love time loop fiction. Steven says, from a game designer's perspective, are there any games that you highly respect from a design perspective that I don't actually enjoy playing? Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I like to focus on the positive. I like to focus on the things that I love. And so that's what I spend my time doing on on these videos and my videos. But there are definitely plenty of games that I play and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. They put a lot of work and effort into this. It just isn't for me. I think that's the case for anyone who plays games. But yeah, absolutely, happens with me all the time. Kevin pointed out with the rulebook comments when we pulled out Red Rising, his friend was concerned when she had to fold it back to hold it in one hand. Yeah, so we have a Red Rising is a fairly big rule book, a wide rule book, and so if you want to hold it in one hand, then you have to fold it over. I don't know if I necessarily recommend trying to hold a rule book in one hand, but I can see in some cases where you might want to hold it while you're playing with the other hand. Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend folding the rule book just to hold it with one hand. Chadwick says that his kids woke him up and dragged him to the kitchen to play Red Rising this morning. That's a lot of fun to hear that you played it as a family. Wesley says, I'm about to venture into my second Kickstarter project that is, in fact, a resource management filler game set in the same world as his first game. So we were talking about spin-off games earlier in terms of Stonemaier games, and Wesley's doing this with a world that he is working on. He says, I noted that those were 2 points that you were considering stepping into. That said, how would you go about pitching a different style game built in the same world in a way that connects with people effectively? I would look at how Keith at Thunderworks has done it with the role player universe. How he has brought people into that world through a variety of different games, but also made it abundantly clear that they are totally different games on his Kickstarter pages on his website. I don't even know offhand all the things that he's done for it, but I think he's done a great job of making that very clear that they are different games in the same universe. Sam says, if you republish Tapestry, which we're not doing, but just a hypothetical question from Sam, would you change the rulebook length? No, I would not. Um, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I mean, with Tapestry, honestly, I think we pulled off quite a few with the Tapestry rulebook because it is not just only a 4-page rulebook, but it is a very visual rulebook. There are examples. There are plenty of visuals in it. Like it's not like we crammed a ton of stuff into a small space. We used normal font sizes and all that stuff. Like I think having the smaller rulebook for Tapestry encourages people to more easily get it to the table, and all the rules that you need are there in the rulebook, including examples of how to play. So I understand that nothing that we've made is perfect. Nothing. Including the rule books. Everything could be marginally better, especially after we get all the feedback from wonderful people who play the game dozens of times. So I'm not saying that, but I'm happy with Tapestry having a 4-page rule book. And I think all the information we need is on those pages. Let's see. Krista says, when you pick up a new game, what's your preferred way to learn how to play? Do I read the rulebook cover to cover? Do I watch a YouTube video? If so, which YouTube tutorials do I prefer? So I actually had this happen with Odin's Ravens. So I can speak to an example here yesterday. I wanted to play Odin's Ravens, and so I did what I usually do, which is I queued up a video. I just searched how to play Odin's Ravens. The publisher actually had a video about it, and that was one of the first videos that came up. And so I watched that video, not intending to learn every rule from the video, but just to get a pretty good grasp on how the game is played. And then I looked through the rule book to see what I was missing, any questions that I had, and then I played the game. So that's my preferred way to do it. I wouldn't say I necessarily have a specific channel that I always go to. Watch It Played is definitely up there, but I don't always need to, like Watch It Played is a rules replacement video. So Watch It Played stances, Rodney's stances, you can use this video and not even look at the rulebook at all if you don't want to, if you can remember everything that he talks about in the video, which I think is awesome. But when I learn a game, I just kind of want to get an idea of how it plays, and then I read the rulebook after that. So that's my preferred way to do it. And there are a lot of creators that have videos that show how the general idea of how the game is played. Yeah. Let's see. Looking through, Facebook has comments going from edge to edge on the screen right now, so it's very difficult to see if there's a question on some of them. Sorry about that. Ivan says, what do I think about Magna Roma? It expires in 2 hours on Kickstarter. I am backing Magna Roma myself, partially because the co-designer of the Wind Gambit, Kai Stark, was involved as a developer for Magna Roma, and I believe in Kai, I believe in what he does, and I also want to support him, so I backed it. Sorry, the comments are a little harder right now to see on longer comments if there's a question on them, and they're harder to read. Let's see. Matt says he works with students with language difficulties and developing social skills. If I wanted to teach them a Stonemaier game, which would you recommend with the most social interaction? I would definitely start with Between Two Cities. Between Two Cities is all about communication and working together with two other people, and it requires very little reading. So if there's language difficulties, it's almost entirely language independent. You have to know some icons and some numbers, but you don't need to know the words on any of the tiles. So definitely Between Two Cities, and then you could level up to Between Two Castles, which uses a similar concept. And castles, I think, are maybe a little more fun to make than cities, but it is definitely more complex than Between Two Cities. Sean says, would I be willing to have a Stonemaier game convention? We do have a Stonemaier game convention called the Stonemaier Games Design Day. I think it would be tough. I think maybe you're referring to the type of convention where we just kind of show off our own stuff, and that feels a little weird to me. I understand why publishers do it. I'm not bashing it at all. The way I said that probably didn't come across the right way, but it feels weird to me personally, for Stonemaier Games specifically, to say, hey, come to us and hang out and play our games for a few days. Maybe people would have fun with that. Maybe I shouldn't completely dismiss that. But when I think about doing an event, I think about adding value to other people. And that's why we do the Stonemaier Games Design Day, which is when we bring in people who want to play test their games, game designers who want to play test their games, and we bring in play testers, and we help them improve their games. So that's what we currently do at the Stonemaier Games Design Day. Joshua says that he's trying to design a time loop board game, but it's proving to be very difficult. Too much fiddliness. The problem with that, Joshua, I gotta say, is that I think Time Stories has done it, and they did it so well. Maybe you don't like Time Stories. I know it's a little divisive, but I love it so much, and I think they did time loops, especially the Time Stories Revolution, the way that I really love time loops. So it's gonna be tough to beat Time Stories if you're making a time loop board game. Landon says, what time loop fiction books do I recommend? I think the only one I've read is 11/22/63. I actually have not seen that. I know or watched it or seen it. I didn't know it was time loop. I thought it was just time travel. Is it actually repeated time loops, or is it just one jump back to the past? That's the difference between time loop and time travel. What do I recommend? Replay. I highly recommend Replay. What is it? Like the 11 and a half lives of, forgetting the name of it. I have these listed on my website. If you search on jamiestegmaier.com for time loop, you'll see it. There's one blog post that has a comprehensive list of all of them. Vito just got home to find his copy of Red Rising. That's awesome. Carol says that her copy of Red Rising is also probably coming today. Rafa says, do you wash hands and care if other people wash their hands before playing board games? That's a tricky question. I usually wash my hands after dinner, and I usually have play board game or have my game night right after dinner. So yes, I wouldn't say that I look at if other people have washed their hands though. Matthew says, I'm getting heavily into viticulture with the Tuscany expansion. That's awesome. He says, I noticed that the vine card and sold cards overhang the player board. Yeah, that's intentional. Those cards were created after the original design for the vineyard mat, and it would make the vineyard mat a lot bigger, I think, if you had them the same size. But Matthew says, the nerd in me finds this annoying. Just curious if you find this annoying and if you have found a solution I've not thought of. And I must admit, I'm not annoyed by it. I mean, they're kind of designed to hang off, makes them easier to pick up and flip over when you need to flip them over. So I don't personally find it annoying. Carol says, what's your current favorite game to play on Board Game Arena, and when am I playing the most? She says, I just started playing my first asynchronous game of Libertalia based on my recommendation. I do love Libertalia on Board Game Arena. What's my current favorite game on Board Game Arena to play? One of my favorites to play on there really is Seven Wonders, because I love how fast Seven Wonders plays. Like, it becomes a filler game on Board Game Arena because it is so fast. So that's up there with one of my favorites to play on there. And what am I playing the most? We jump around a lot on Board Game Arena, so I don't know if there's necessarily one that we play the most. I think tonight at game night, I think it's likely that we'll play the Lost Ruins of Arnak, because I really do enjoy that game, and I haven't played it on Board Game Arena yet. I've only played it in person. Kyle has a nice note. He says, thanks for all that you do for the fans and the community. Thank your team as well for for us, they do a lot and enable you to do what you do. Absolutely. I'm so grateful for Joe and Alex and Alan and Christine and Shannon over at Panda and the many, many other people who make Stonemaier games function. Yeah. Chad says, do I have a friend like Severo in Red Rising? Would you even want a friend like him? I don't have a friend like Severo, and I think it would be a struggle to have a friend like Severo. It would definitely be interesting. Um, but I feel like Severo would be that friend that would like just pop up at your front door every now and then. And I don't like people popping up at my front door randomly or surprisingly. So I don't think that would go over well with me. Chad says that Incursion is a good time loop story, and I have not read that. So, is that Blake? Is the author Blake somebody? Incursion. No, it's by Andy Diggle. I'm not familiar with this. Okay, I'll have to check that out. I'm not familiar with Incursion. Yeah, is this the one by Andy Diggle? That's the one that I see pop up on Amazon, Chad. Tony says, at what point do you think a publisher has a responsibility to release updated printed rulebooks versus downloadable FAQs? That's a great question, Tony. Um, that is a great question. I mean, if it's tough because I mean, if it's one of those things where it is you cannot play the game unless you have, or you cannot easily play the game if you have the correct rulebook. Like if it's just if it's a few little notes here and there. I mean, we all have FAQs online. I think those FAQs are helpful. But if the FAQs present information that is not even in the core rulebook, and you can't play the game without that information, that's a pretty big deal. At the same time, I know the logistics of shipping rulebooks to people worldwide is not easy. I mean, that is a major endeavor to do. So I think it's got to be taken on a case by case basis. I think sometimes you could include it with another product. When do I think a publisher has a responsibility to do it? I don't know. It really depends on the situation, Tony. That's a great question. I just don't know. I have a specific answer. I did read your earlier comment. I didn't see a question in it. That's why I didn't answer it. But it sounds like in that case, it might be something important for them to do. But ideally, they would find a way to combine that with something else they're shipping because it is so. It's tough to ship something like that. Yeah. Jake says you might be thinking of the seven and a half deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I am partially thinking of that, but I haven't actually read that one yet. That one's on my list. I actually purchased that book, but I haven't read it yet. But I'm thinking of another book. I think it's 11 and a half something. Let me look up Jamie Stegmaier Time Loop. Favorite Time Loop fiction. Okay, I am thinking of, and it's not a good, well, actually, I think it is Time Loop. It's The First 15 Lives of Harry August is the one that I'm thinking of. Yeah. Oh, I actually don't. Oh, yeah. Eric says, "Do I have the Wingspan big box prototype? Show us." Nope. That's a great. Every day I hope that I get it, but I have not gotten it. And every week I kind of go to Panda and say, "Hey, what's going on with the big box?" So I'll do that again. Can't hurt to. Well, I don't want to pester them. I know they're working on it, but yeah, I will ask them about it to see. I don't have it right now. Pete says that 11/22/63 does have a time loop done in a kind of a unique way, but the bulk of the story is a single time trip. Okay, I'm still intrigued by it. I will. I'll look that up as well. Let me do that before I forget. 11 to 22. And I guess I would say this: would you recommend the book over the show, or the book before the show before the book? What would you recommend there? I believe it's an Amazon Prime show. Tim says, have I seen there's a Seven Wonders mystery game coming? I think an announcement is coming April 26th. I did see it mentioned on Board Game Geek yesterday, and that it is, as far as I know, it is not like a printed game. It's more of a meta game, a mystery that you can solve from home using clues in Seven Wonders, not in Red Rising. Yeah, I don't think it's a new product, I guess is what I'm saying, based on the post I read yesterday. And he says that they just received Red Rising. That's wonderful. Eddie says, what game have I found the most different in feel vibe in terms of playing it in person versus playing it online? What feels so different? Actually, okay, I was going to stumble over an answer, but I know my answer for this, and that is Seasons. Seasons is a beautiful game on the tabletop, but Seasons has so many triggers that you need to remember on your cards, especially as you build your engine, that I found it kind of slow and cumbersome in person. I ended up playing it a couple times and then giving it away. However, on Board Game Arena, I think it's all those the game remembers all those triggers for you and helps to remind you of them. And I think that makes the playing experience so much better and so much smoother and faster, even at higher player counts. So it's a weird thing because it really is. I mean, Seasons is a beautiful game. It looks fantastic on the tabletop, but I think it plays a lot better on Board Game Arena. Um, that's one that maybe someday I should return to and play on the tabletop now that I played on Board Game Arena. But with all the triggers, I don't know if the experience can be better than the one on Board Game Arena or a full AI digital version. Yeah. Samwise says, "Do I have an exact date for Red Rising?" The worldwide retail release date for Red Rising is May 28th. If you're talking about shipping for Red Rising, I don't have an exact date, but if you have ordered it from us and you are a champion, your order should have already shipped or should be shipping this week at the very latest. If you're not a champion, it should ship next week or later this week or next week. Okay, Blake Crow. Okay, maybe Recursion is the book that. Yeah, I think Recursion is the book that was being referred to, not Incursion. That was the Blake that I was thinking of. And I think I do have a sample of that, but I'll get another sample of it just to check it out. Let's see. Facebook's doing weird stuff with the comments as usual, but let me see if there are any other questions here. Here's a long question, which is fine. Facebook is just making it hard to read today. Chad says that his puppy Fenris recently turned 2 years old. That's wonderful. Mercurio says favorite medium range game like Battlestar Galactica with hidden agendas, hidden agenda style game. In the medium range, probably Shadows over Camelot. I do really enjoy Shadows over Camelot. Tim says, did the new Pendulum overlays arrive? Yeah, Tim, they did. And I don't have a full answer about this yet. I'm looking at my email to see if I do have a full answer. I do not. But we have decided that we are not going to make overlays for Pendulum. And instead, I have asked the people who originally inspired the idea of the overlays, Eugenia and Matt, if they would be willing to make them and sell them on a store like Etsy to those who want them. We found that we couldn't make them at the same high quality that Eugenia and Matt had at scale, and I don't want to offer for those who are really passionate about Pendulum and want these nice overlays. I think they deserve the best, and so I am asking Eugenia and Matt to consider doing that, and I haven't heard back from them yet. Yeah. Michael says, have I ever played Taverns of Tefenthal? I have. I have played it. He says it's one of our most played games next to our Stonemaier collection. That's wonderful, yeah. I have played it. I did enjoy it. And it's by the same guys that made Quacks of Quedlinburg. Yeah. Cameron says, you mentioned before that you work around 60 hours per week. Yeah, so between 60 and 70 hours. How much of that time would you guesstimate is design time? On a good week, maybe 10 hours. Yeah, on a good week. Pete says, so my question about 11/22/63, he says, oh, it's a Hulu show, not Amazon Prime for 11/22. He says, the book is better, but the show is good, but the book is better. Thank you, Pete, for mentioning that. Yeah, I'll probably gravitate towards the book since that, I agree, Stephen King is a very, very talented author. Board Game Shepherd says, are there any more planned expansions for Scythe? No, I appreciate you asking, but yeah, we've kind of been very public in saying that we are finished making content in the Scythe for Scythe, the tabletop game. That we have finished the story, we have finished the components, the things that we're making for that. And while I am open to exploring Jakob's 1920 plus world in other games, completely different games, other games, Scythe itself is complete. Andy says, do I enjoy social deduction hidden info games? Have you seen or do you have thoughts on hidden leaders currently on Kickstarter? I haven't really looked into hidden leaders all that much. I've seen a few content creators talk about it, but I haven't looked into it. There are some social deduction hidden info games that I enjoy. It isn't a format that I've thought a lot about in the last year, but I enjoy like the Resistance Avalon. I enjoy Coup. I enjoy A Fake Artist Goes to New York and Spyfall. So there are some of that genre that I do enjoy. It's probably not the type of game that gets to my table very often, but when it does, I have fun with them. Yeah. Phil says, is there any update on the digital expansions for Wingspan on Steam, or will that come to Board Game Arena? That is a great question, Phil, but that is definitely very much in the hands of Monster Couch. So I would ask Monster Couch about them. Every now and then they send us an update, but I found that even whenever they give me an update, the only real information, like I occasionally ask them, like, hey, when are you going to get Wingspan on iOS and Android? And the answer has been so delayed that I no longer can really even pass along their answer because it's so off what the original estimate was. So I would go to them and ask what information they're able to provide right now. That's Monster Couch, the digital developer of Wingspan Digital. Oh, my mom's here. Hey, Mom. She's popping in the live stream. Mom says that my dad is home from the hospital and resting happily. Thank you for sharing that, Mom. I'm relieved to hear that. Yeah, my dad, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, my dad was in the hospital for surgery, had a the surgery went well, really, really tough recovery for a few days after that surgery, and then things got a lot better, and then they got worse again, and my dad had to go back to the hospital and has been in the hospital for the last week. And so I'm very glad to hear that he's back home. He's been in my thoughts constantly because I want him to be home. I want him to be able to digest food again. And his body is struggling with that right now. So I'm glad to hear that he's back home in your care, Mom. And I'm glad the hospital is close by in case he needs to go back there, but hopefully not. Eddie says, is there any game development advice that you give that is a good idea, but you don't really adhere to it in my own personal development? Ooh, that's an interesting question, Eddie. I like that. I don't actually adhere to. I mean, there certainly are. Yeah, let's see. So, yeah, so one advice that I give in general is don't make art for your game until you figured out what the game is. And I don't always follow that because I get really excited by art sometimes. And I often build the game from the art. So I would not recommend doing that for most people. I think getting a few concepts can be fun, but for really going deep into the art, I do not recommend doing that before you actually design the full game. And that's something that I contradict all the time and probably will continue to do so, but I need to be careful about that. Eric says, when will there be a new expansion for Wingspan? I don't know. I don't know. It's up to Elizabeth and when Elizabeth is ready to design the next expansion, ready to get that ready. But in the meantime, we're working on the Wingspan Big Box, which is not an expansion. It's just an accessory, a storage solution for Wingspan. But that's what we're working on, and that's what I'm hoping to have available by the end of this year. Tonk says, have I ever played one of my games incognito and then revealed that you created the game when you won, like Ben in Parks and Rec? The closest I've gotten to this is that a few years ago, my co-designer for Red Rising brought Red Rising under a different name to the Stonemaier Games Design Day as his own design. And it is very much Alex's own design, but it's also my design. And we did not mention at the time that I was involved in the design of it at all, as we wanted to get honest feedback about it. And what we learned was that and it was interesting to do that because with me having no association with it at all, it was the top-rated game of Design Day that year, which was very encouraging to see. I don't know if that rating would have been tainted in any way, either up higher or lower, if it had been clear that I was the co-designer. I don't know. Maybe we'll try that in the future to see how that impacts the ratings. Adrian says, which game do I prefer, Gaia Project or Terra Mystica? I am definitely much more of a fan of Terra Mystica. I appreciate what they did with Gaia Project. I think it is maybe technically a better design, but I think Terra Mystica is more fun, and it's easier for me to understand the spatial element of Terra Mystica, and I also like the theme more. I like kind of grounded fantasy more than space in terms of theming. Ooh, I'm a little over time today. Let me see if there's any other questions here real quick. Tonk says, is it the case that you're really good at your own games, or is that a misconception? That's a misconception because I would say I'm pretty solid at my games. I understand how they work, but when I play my games, I am more focused on the fun that other people are having, and I'm focused on experimentation, just kind of pushing different buttons, seeing what I can do differently every time I play. And let's see, last, Victoria says, hi from your neighbor in Kansas City. Kansas City is a nice 4-hour drive from St. Louis, and we do visit from time to time because Megan, my girlfriend, is from Kansas City, so we visit her family there a couple times a year. One last quick question. Let's see. Mario says, do I plan? Oh, Ivan has a tip here that I'll read out loud as well. Mario says, do you have a plan to do any project with Mr. Cuddington or Andrew Bosley? I would love to work with either of them again in the future. Andrew currently is doing, or he has done the Tapestry and has done art for the next expansion for Tapestry. But I would love to work with him again. Love to work with Mr. Cuddington, which is a husband-wife team. And let's see, I know there's a question from Richard here, but I wouldn't be able to answer it. Richard's asking my favorite song in each decade. I wouldn't be able to answer that off the top of my head. Ivan has a little tip that I want to mention while my mom and dad are listening. He said, I had problems with food digestion and tried everything and nothing helped. And then I tried sauerkraut juice and it worked like magic. I don't love sauerkraut. In fact, I can't eat sauerkraut, but I think my dad can eat it. And so I'll mention that to him, or for him to mention to his doctor. This is a very deep issue related to his surgery. And so I'm not sure that is the solution, but it's good to know, Ivan. I appreciate you sharing that, and I will let my parents know about that. Sean said, should all U.S. copies of Red Rising be shipped for Champions? They should, if they were pre-ordered. Let me look at the update I had yesterday about that. There are some, yeah, I mean, if you ordered more than like a week ago from the US, your Red Rising copy should have shipped. And if it hasn't, email your order number to contact@stonemaiergames.com and Joe will look into it. Okay, one last question. Your chat says, have I ever let an upcoming game slip? Yeah, I definitely have. Yeah, games, expansions, I've let things slip all the time. I have to be careful about that. All right, a little over time today, but thank you for joining me. As always, I don't care that I went over. I had fun with you today. Thank you for dropping in, for asking questions, and for dealing with Facebook's oddness today. And I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Wednesday. Take care.